Greetings, adventurers. This is Chris, aka Nas, with new adventures in Skyrim. I hope everything's going well with you and you're taking care of yourselves and the ones you love. Before we hop in character, below each episode is a companion story. Very briefly, it will just go over insight, context, exposition, sometimes nuanced thought, or as I say, internal dialogue that the character has that I can't always express without breaking character. And sometimes it'll make connections and callbacks to other episodes or lore outside of my actual role plays. And they're all conveniently time-stamped, so if you're down and want to hop back up, you can just click and go right back up to the action. This is another Glamek and a half episode. That means there's going to be hopefully absolutely no action in this video and just a lot of him talking and reflecting. And as this is a Glamek half episode, as I tend to do, I don't plan on saying anything at the end, so I'm going to front load it all here by saying take care of yourselves, take care of the ones you love, and we'll see you on the next adventure. Cheers! There was a brutal battle between a werewolf slayer and his prey, a gray and wise werewolf. He's been hunting this one for several years now. It had cost the hunter his wife, who couldn't stay at home for some man who seemed destined to find himself dead in the freezing wilderness instead of at home in a warm bed with her. It had cost him several friends now too, as they had died leading up to this moment. Now while this wolf was indeed gray with age, it was scarred greatly. This meant it survived many battles and was no pushover. But this man, he had a special advantage, his silver sword. This is what would turn the tide of this battle finally and for the last time. And indeed, the first time the blade bit home and drew blood, the Werebeast howled angrily and attacked with such a savage rage that the hunter barely evaded the savage swipes himself. After the second sword wound opened up, the wolf finally seemed to be slightly more apprehensive, stalking and almost thinking, but the man knew these beasts were thoughtless monsters, not human at this time. So when he raised his blade over his head and came down with the final strike, he was surprised when the creature lunged forward and bit his forearm with a sickening and gruesome crunch. The weapon clattered to the ground, as did the hunter, after a backhanded punch sent him reeling to the floor. When he either woke up or got his senses about him, the wolf that was before him stood now before him as a man. He too was in pain and bleeding, but not dead. The hunter, he had failed, and in that moment of irony, the man stood over the hunter and plunged the silver sword into his heart. The hunter was dead at the hands of his own silver weapon. Campfires, castles, cities. I'm not sure I expected to take on all of this, but sometimes you gotta shake the heck out of something and let them settle properly, I guess. Now that I have some time to just take a moment and think, the Dawnguard doesn't seem too appealing, not well put together, not well thought out. I'm willing to go out as far as to say right now they're more of a liability to themselves and anyone involved with them than they're likely to do any benefit out here for anybody. One of their newest recruits, I watched battle an elk for 20 minutes. Most of them are hiding in the castle, not doing anything. Again, sending people like me out. The vampire threat itself doesn't seem anything too great. I've stumbled across some of them not knowing what was going on, and I was no worse for the wear. Seems like a bunch of self-important people arguing about things, grandstanding and posturing. I don't have time for any of that. But then again, I do want to go back after this and see if they're doing any bounties on vampires or how that's working. I'm not saying I have to go out and kill everyone. Similarly, I wouldn't want anyone just going around hunting werewolves as if all of them were the same, but I'm sure there's some vampires that need killing. As much as I talk about going to that one cottage out there, they don't attack me on sight, so all is well that ends well, I guess. I feel these moons sometimes are just so heavy, the eyes of Hircine, but as I get further away from everything that I was at, the weight seems less intense. Nights like this I can stare back and not feel the gaze of him so intently. As I push him further away, I feel less of an urge to change into that other form also. But I'm still just tired mentally. I don't know when I'm supposed to process all of this. And there's a difference between sleep and rest, and maybe what I'd need is just some time to rest, calm myself, take more moments like these and reflect. Very soon, probably in the morning, I'm going to have to figure out if I'm going to help these old soldiers or go help the priest immediately. I don't think he's foolish enough to go in by himself. So I think I'm going to help these folks. If something doesn't seem right, it could very well be a trap. But if it's a trap, it's better to have me walking into it than someone who doesn't know what they're doing or what they're in for. And best case scenario, I help some people who need help. I can't wait to one day see some of the companions again, especially Farkas and Rhea. Yeah. It's funny now that I actually have a moment to reflect. He is that dour and quiet veteran, and Rhea seems to be the exact opposite. Young, boisterous, and full of fire. Quite the pair they would make. And I'm not saying something like me is going to shake up something like the companions. They're not all going to miss me, but I sure as heck miss at least some of them. Then again, some of them not so much. Vilkas was just too condescending. Couldn't handle it. Ayala was always just too involved and detached. Could never get a good gauge on her. I don't know. Think I'm gonna go put some food in my belly. Take a little bit of time and rest, and when the sun comes up, move forward. Gods and grounds, skies and towns. Hues may change, so too may names. But everywhere I go, it's all the same. It was many, many moons after the hunter had fallen, but the gray wolf moved on. And still, challengers came. They came, and then they fell. But no matter how long you wait and how far you flee, you can't hide from who you are and what you've done. But one day, he himself was eager to get back to Sovngarde, and through an arduous journey, one for another day, he had freed himself of the changing curse. In that journey, he bought the sword with him, a reminder of his savage, older days, and instead took up smithing. That sword one day broke, the blade itself snapping in two. The blade was eventually fixed at the forge and by his hand. Newer and now more of him was poured into that blade, its new edge sharp and gleaming in the sunlight. Later the crossguard broke, the pommel, the handle. The entire thing seemed to piece by piece break apart, only to be replaced by his own personal upgrades. The sword was his just as it was, but at the same time it seemed entirely new. It had transformed in one way, but the sword's history and meaning were what held the value to the man, not its appearance. The weight was different, the feel was different, but the soul and the story of the sword were the same, and those sung to the heavens. He now lived as a man, not a wolf, so when one day a necromancer attacked him, eager to claim the bounty of the gray wolf, he tried to explain, tried to flee, tried to make amends, tried to speak, but they'd have none of it. Finally, they came face to face, and standing next to the necromancer was an undead thrall, whose lifeless blue and milky white eyes suddenly flared red at the moment they locked onto the man's eyes across from him. Without a word, the thrall shot its hand out and smashed the necromancer across the face with its axe. There was a sickening thud and a bluish-black flash, and by all accounts, that thrall should have died as its connection was severed to that necromancer. But instead, its red eyes leapt forward and attacked the man before him. They fought for several long minutes, both wounding each other heavily. Finally, the man severed the head of the thrall, and the lifeless body fell to the ground, and the head rolled right next to where the bleeding and dying man now sat down.
"You never should have hunted me to begin with. The choices you made in your life have brought you here,"
said the man, who by all measures of logic should now be dead. But the head's eyes glowed a magical and hateful red.
That's the same sword. My sword. The sword that killed me.
The sentences died as the man died, and so too did the Revenant's hate. But the real question is, was that the same sword?